flock was gathered in the middle of the dewy glade, staring up at the statue of Chyros with reverence. A golden glow hit their feathered wings from the sun that had just barely peeked its way out of the horizon. The sunrise ceremony had just ended, and it was time to begin the rite of daybreak. I gazed at my talons, dragging them forward, just one in front of the other, until I reached the flock and slipped into the back where I wouldn't be noticed. It was just a short walk from my house, but the saunter over there felt like an eternity. I arrived at the gathering long after my mom had left the area with the other hunters. They weren't even visible in the light gap behind Chyros, probably deep in the woods by now. I was late to the rite of daybreak, a heinous crime in of itself. Still, I didn't skip it entirely, which spared me from any punishment worse than what my life already was. The whole flock descended, so now I wasn't the only one on the ground. Chief Lucian, my father, hit the earth last, his orange and red feathers billowing like fire in the wind. As soon as his talons grazed the ground with their touch, a hush rested upon the flock. Everyone was captivated as he began to tell the story of Chyros, his gravelly voice cutting deeply through the quiet.
Danger, lies, treachery. Such was a world condemned to shadows and deceit, a world that had no hope of recovering, no hope for life.
A grave silence settled across the flock. No one dared say a single word.
Death, pain, darkness. Such was the world before light had rested upon us. Such was the world before the preeminent Chyros descended into the continent of Calandira. A gift was sent to the soul that would save us all. A gift that had never before been seen. Fire.
As soon as Chief Lucian uttered the word, the whole flock whipped their heads high to the sky and breathed a blazing flame up to the sun. The scorching heat singed the tips of my feathers, forcing me to duck down as their inferno blazed on. Energy rippled through the glade as vigorously as an earthquake. Everywhere I looked, the glorious light burned brightly, reminding me of what I'll never be strong enough to wield. The tremendous rumbling abruptly came to a stop, and Chief Lucian spoke again, his voice cold, grim, lightless.
And with fire comes cleansing. A cleansing of something terrifying, something corrupt, something evil.
The tension permeated throughout the flock. Dragons clenched fists, tightened wings to their back, pressed weight deeper into the ground, watching with apprehension as father resumed the tale that we've heard thousands of times.
The kingdom of Sagara stretched its grip wide, grasping the southern mainland and threatening to break into the northern coast as well.
The tension of the flock thrusted itself deeper into their souls, breaking into mine as well. I watched as they silently stared at the chief, eerily still, not noticing as a small, wingless whelp near the back of the crowd shifted uncomfortably.
The Sagaran dictator, King Umbra, was the most vile of dragons to ever set foot upon Calandira. He had no fire, only controlled the shadows. He had no mercy, forcing everyone to obey his fierce commands. And he had no wings, tethering his subjects to the ground in his tyranny.
Chief Lucian looked directly at me when he said that. I pretended it was only him, when in reality, a large section of the dragons in the flock glared harshly at me, backing up so they weren't so close. I squirmed under their intense glares. Why couldn't he just continue? An hour of time crumbled away. At least that's what it felt like to me, before his voice boomed through the crowd. Every person in the flock turned to look at him, but I was still closing my eyes, keeping my head low until every last pair drifted away from me.
Gratefully, the almighty Chyros had a plan to fix the broken world. He laid siege upon the kingdom of Sagara 1,000 years ago to this very day. So go, my friends, honor this glorious event in your heart.
The flock cheered and hollered, shaking the earth with their tumultuous noise. I crouched low to the ground, mostly to keep myself from falling over, but also to avoid being seen. The flock disbanded to go about their daily tasks, waiting for the tale to continue at dinner. Dragons flew off to get ready for the migration that would come in just 8 days. I had never gone on a migration before, for obvious reasons. I glared at my bare back, still just as wingless as before. I turned my attention to the flock in front of me, everyone flying around in the bustle of the moment. Parents gathered possessions, packing them tightly in bundles of chay leaf, a thick, durable leaf that the hunters often brought back from the woods. Kids darted to and fro, charging at each other with fake spears and arrows in the spirit of the siege. My eyes shot open. I tripped over my talons to get away from them, from their sharp weapons, and from the memories that I couldn't keep at bay. I tightened my eyes, struggling to block them out, but it obviously didn't work. I was immediately met with a constant jarring feeling of being poked at from all directions. Indistinguishable faces loomed above me, sneering and laughing. I opened my eyes as their small laughs echoed down the way. Kids are terrible. They're their parents' carbon copy, except without the fear or awareness that keeps them away from something dangerous. I walked away, dragging my feet on the ground, leaving the kids to torment each other in the streets. I turned towards my house, the heavy stone walls looming above me. It's probably best that I return to my room. I slowly trudged forward until something caught my eye. It was a brick red dragon. My pulse quickened and I bolted to the safety of my room, hopping through the window and curling up tightly on the floor. My shallow breaths kept getting caught in my throat as I tried to contain myself, pounding, one beat after another. My heart was the only thing keeping me sane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. A tear pulled itself down my cheek as I pushed myself to my feet and forced myself back outside. Was the red dragon still there? Perhaps I could find out who he was, or why he came to the light flare flock to begin with. I peered out from the stone, looking around to see where he went, but he was gone. Must have walked closer into the village. I glanced back into the distance where dragons flew overhead. I was definitely not following him that far. I shifted my gaze back to the window, the room inside seeming to suck all light and life from the world. I guess I better return now that the brick red dragon wasn't around. Quickly, I took one last glance at the village, just to be sure he was actually nowhere to be seen. As I did, though, I saw Lux. Normally, that wouldn't have caught my attention, as I see him every day. But today, he had something around his wrist. It was one of those cursed bracelets. The same one that the red brick dragon had. I sat down, my intestines squirming at the pit of my stomach. Why would he, of all dragons? I halted, watching him walk around. It really made perfect sense once I thought about it more. When you grow up with someone, they know you the most. So Lux knew very well how wretched I was. The bracelets must have been some kind of anti-me club. Nobody else thought the bracelets were weird, just another decorative trinket. Perhaps everyone else was in on it. It'd only be a matter of time before the whole flock had one. Father, mother, the whole world practically already did. I sighed and looked back up at the village. The hours ticked down as I watched the flock anxiously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, 12, 13. At least 13 dragons with the bracelets had passed through my narrow line of vision from the corner of my nest, most of which I'd never seen before. What are they doing here? I thought as I watched the strange dragons dart to and fro, as if they had lived here their whole lives. Dragons talked to them like they were old friends, walking up casually and just striking up a conversation in the spur of the moment. It seemed as though I was the only one who thought that the arrival of these strange dragons was unnatural in any way. And perhaps it wasn't weird at all. The flock was right about these things, so I kept my head down and turned around. The sun creeped its way westward, the shift in hues casting an orange glow on the grass, similar to morning, except with the reddish undertones that hint at the coming of nighttime. The hour had been altered, but nearly nothing else had. The strange dragons still hovered around the glade, and the rush to prepare for the upcoming migration continued to dangle in the air. The blare of an old horn bellowed through the chilling breeze, marking the arrival of my mother. I heaved my way back onto my wrists, trying to muster up the courage to walk forward to the statue of Chyros behind the rest of the flock. I locked my eyes on the dead blades of grass, refusing to look up as my mother and the other hunters strutted forward, carrying a woven bag filled to the brim with squirrels and rabbits. Only small catches, but there was enough to feed the whole flock, as well as the random extra dragons that materialized throughout the day. A miniature team of dragons worked together to quickly roast the game, while the rest of the flock prepared the dinner area. They traveled to a wide, empty field with 2 immense stone pedestals for the food to sit upon. I lingered at the edges of the field. The flock wouldn't want my help anyway. I observed the dragons setting up the slates of stone next to the pillars, my very being paling into the comparison of their unity. Rumbling through the slight fog, the horn pierced the flock's attention again, causing everyone to look up simultaneously. Dinner was starting, and collectively the flock gazed softly to the heavens, where the sun was ascending its endless flight across the sky. If Chyros had any grace to look down on me, I would wish with all my heart that I'd remain overlooked during this year's rite of daybreak. This was always the hardest time of year, and I'd wish it just drift away quickly so the flock could leave. A tear clung to the feathers at the edges of my eyes. I looked up at the sky, rich with the hues of sunset. The horn resonated again, low and mellow. Chief Lucian stood up and nodded. It was now where he and his family would get their supper, as they were the most respected people in the flock. It was customary for them to go first, so I was technically supposed to go, but I waited as I always did, watching Father, Lux, and my mother get the first picks from the pile of limp animals. I lingered behind until the majority of the flock received their food. They needed it more after all. Eventually I got my dinner, a large slate carrying a shriveled up squirrel, before starting to the very edge of the field. I didn't glance up at my mom, not even once, who was sitting in the row with her friends, her virulent laugh haunting my steps. Just keep your eyes on the ground, Eclipse. No one will notice you. Just walk away. No one will laugh. Pay very little attention to the world, and it will pay very little attention to you. So I walked, looked down, counted the steps it would take me to reach the fringes of the forest. 11, 12, 13. Slam! I crashed into someone that I hadn't noticed walking in front of me. Sorry, I mumbled under my breath, picking up my slate with shaky talons. She emitted a low, sharp growl before sweeping away, glaring at me like I was the foulest thing in Calandira. Cautiously, I watched her storm off, the sunlight flashing off her bracelet for a fraction of a second. My pulse faltered. It was a bracelet with a flaming arrow. Why were they everywhere now? Images of the red brick dragon, Lux, and all the others whipped through my brain. They seemed pretty normal. They did hate me more than the average dragon did, but that in of itself wasn't really weird. I was hideous after all, so it would be hard not to hate me. I tightened my grip on my slate. Still, nobody had ever cast a shadow over me, not even Father. I closed my eyes, the shadow of the brick red dragon sheathing me for eternity. I pushed the image out of my head and burst to the edges of the wood, my pounding heart finally containing itself now that I was away from the flock. I retired right outside the forest, searching the flock with red, puffy eyes. After a moment of nothing catching my eye, I glanced away from the field and back towards my roasted squirrel. The taste of squirrel never really resonated with me. It was always so rubbery, but I forced it down anyways, the large bite scraping my throat as I swallowed. I was about to take another painstaking bite when the horn pierced through the fog. I sighed. It was time for the legend to continue. I slowly stood up, ruffling my feathers to fight the cooling air of autumn. I trudged back to the flock, arriving just as Chief Lucian started to speak again.
My fellow dragons of the Light Flare flock, we gather here to celebrate the Siege of Fire, a striking display of bravery, courage, and championed by the great leader Chyros, the only one with the perceptive power to truly understand what the Kingdom of Sagara was doing right before their very eyes. Most people in the ancient days perceived the kingdom as a glorious place that was blessed by the sun. After all, for a while it was prosperous, seemingly more so than the flocks at the time. But the almighty Chyros knew. He knew that the kingdom was a wicked concoction, designed to chip away at our immense strength and unity. The kingdom of Sagara was a wasteland, where ideas festered, diseases spread, and death permeated across Calandira. Chief Lucian stood tall, his voice sharp and biting. The flock backed away in fear of the words he was saying, some even hissing. Everyone knew what happened next, and they all shifted to the sides of the statue, so we could see the long gap between the trees. A line of bows were set up on the ground, where 13 dragons got into position. They placed them underneath their forearms, pointing the tip to the ground, waiting for the signal to spring into the air. Somehow, in all the bustle of moving so fast, I'd been thrust to the front of the flock. I wasn't sure how it happened, since I always try to linger in the back. I attempted to circle back around, but dragons after dragons after dragons were pressing in and looking for places to stand. I sighed, accepting my fate and staying where I was. Once we were all settled, the chief continued with the legendary tale. Of course, something must be done about the abomination of the kingdom. Chyros couldn't bear to watch as the world was consumed with madness, so he created an invention that would blaze across the sky, guiding him to victory against Sagara. Behold, the flaming arrow!
Chief Lucian turned and signaled to the archers behind him. In one swift motion, they burst into the air and shot the arrows into the distance in sync. Except for one of them. One of them prepared their bow later than the others. One of them turned towards the flock. And one of them fired his bow directly at me, without hesitation, his bracelet burning with the reflection of the flaming arrow that spun in my direction. At the time, I hadn't understood what had happened. One moment I was watching the arrows blaze off into the distance, and the next, a burning pain pierced my left arm. I let out a shriek as the arrow sank deeper. Blood trickled against my nerves, but it was the least of my worries. My whole arm felt as though it was blazing with a raging inferno, spreading fast like a parasite. The world slowed to a crawl, more arrows, one after another, lurching towards me, piercing through my flesh in countless other places. My breaths became shallow and my eyes fluttered between closed and halfway open. The world was black on the edges, as I felt my weight stagger. There was no way out of the crowd of people that seemed to be pressing in closer. I couldn't see any gaps behind me or to the sides. Dragons advanced towards me, all unified by one thing, a black bracelet adorned with a symbol of a flaming arrow. I stared blankly at the arrow on their bracelets, my heart heavy and pounding hard in my chest. Fire, arrows, both meant to strike down a bird from the sky, to torture it and smother all chances of life from its hollow bones. I gritted my teeth and backed up, slamming into the dragon behind me. They slashed at me with their claws, sharp as daggers. Their hard blows knocked me to the ground, forcing my breath from my lungs for a fraction of a second. I whimpered, calling out the only thing I could. "Mother!" I cried, my voice trembling and broken, probably too quiet for anyone to hear. I opened my eyes, squinting through the blood to see the fractured world. There she was, frozen, staring from the middle of the confused flock with wide eyes. She wasn't confused. She was just fearful, panicked, terrified. She blinked, and so did I. "Mother," I whispered with tears in my eyes as the dragons continued to slash at me. She wouldn't hear my shattered plea. Her mind was far away, looking into the forest, then back at me. Without a moment more of hesitation, she bolted away into the long cutout leading into the forest. My heart fell and tears stormed in my eyes. "Mother!" I called after her, my voice the strongest it had ever been. I can't believe she would... I closed my eyes tightly, unable to finish the thought. No, she couldn't just leave me here to die. She was my mother. Mothers don't abandon their kids when they're in the face of certain doom. A rush of energy pulsed through my nerves, through my heart, through my eyes. I propelled myself forward, out of the pool of blood clinging to my feathers, and dodged my way between the braceleted dragons that had started to disband their circles. Muffled noises echoed in my brain, likely roars of shock and surprise, but they just bounced off my ears as though I didn't have any. No sounds penetrated my head, no pain throbbed in my arms, no thoughts entered the fog that had taken over my brain and actions. It was all gone, just a numb blur as I kept my gaze locked on Mother. She turned, looking at me with haunting eyes. I halted, unsure of what I was going to do now that I had finally had her attention. I tried to think, but the fog of adrenaline still prevented any thoughts from reaching my mind. Shadows stretched long across the ground, signaling that the sun would set soon. The rest of the flock would anxiously go back to their huts, leaving the field barren and desolate for the night. But I barely noticed what time it was. I only looked at Mother, and she looked at me. The moment, while only a fraction of a second, expanded for eternity. I was unable to think, unable to move, unable to do anything that could have kept her there for longer than that one moment. I looked down heavily at my shadow, which was barely grazing Mother's talons. I tensed, my heart and mind frozen in place. I looked up at her eyes, hollow and empty, before staggering away from her, my shadow retreating with me. She stared at it, at me, then at the flock behind me. In an instant, everything clashed into my senses, and I could hear the beating wings of the strange dragons that were charging towards me. The moment had vanished, and Mother turned away, escaping into the woods. I gazed after her. I couldn't follow her anymore. She was in the forest now, a place that only hunters were permitted to go. Mother was gone, but the braceleted dragons weren't. They dove towards me, their fiery breaths lighting the tips of my feathers aflame. Before I could think or even feel fear, my legs carried me away, pounding one after another, forcing me straight into the forest. I faltered slightly as I took the first step that I've ever taken into the woods. I tried to stop myself and make myself turn back, but it was impossible to reclaim my mind. That was wiring relentlessly, heart pounding too quickly, eyes bloodshot and beady, movements, jerky and jumpy. I was a feral animal, pin focused on evading the danger, and I couldn't do anything as I darted through the forest, running for a long while before a sharp pain in my arm jolted me back to life. The fog vanished from my mind, and I collapsed to the ground from the weight of everything that had just happened. All at once, memories of the past hour or so crashed into my soul, and I suddenly remembered why I was in the forest, what happened in the flock, and how Mother had abandoned me. I curled up on the ground, quickly realizing that was a mistake, since pain racked my muscles every time I moved. I glanced down at my feathers out of the corner of my eye, trying not to lift my head. Even from that small glimpse, I could tell that I was a lot more injured than I originally thought. My heartbeat throbbed, pulsing around me in the darkness. It was hard to imagine that it was only coming from one place. It seemed as though the pulsing was everywhere and nowhere at once, in the forest around me, in my head, in my pierced and burned limbs. I once again looked down at my feathers. My inking pattern seemed to have grown. They do that sometimes, especially in dark places. But I knew it was likely just a trick of the shadows. I closed my eyes tightly, fear trembling throughout my bones. Here I was, in the forest at nighttime, a place where there was no light. Yet here I lay, wounded and dying on the ground. I laughed slightly, the rumble causing deep pain to explode from my ribs. It's funny how someone would willingly jump into darkness in order to survive. Thank you guys so much for staying till the end of the chapter. Well, technically this is not the end of the chapter. This is the end of the first part of the chapter. It was a little too long, so I couldn't all fit it in this video, sadly. But the next one will be coming out tomorrow on the 26th. So thank you guys so much. And once again, this has been so fun to create, and it's been so long. Hopefully the next chapter will not take as long as this one. But huge thank you to my sister Chelberry, who managed to find some time to make the music in this video. If you guys are interested, I have made this nice and easy playlist that you can click on up here, that contains and will contain all of the chapters for Casting Shadows that I've made so far, and I'll just keep posting in there regularly with all the chapters, so that will be a place where you can find all of them in a very easy place. But yeah, bye. See you. Goodbye. I'm tired. Okay, bye.